everyone, I'm your host Neha and you're tuned into Durian Dreaming, the show that brings you extraordinary stories from seemingly ordinary experiences in Indonesia's fast-paced market. Let's dive into today's conversation with another inspiring guest. Hi everyone, joining me today on Durian Dreaming is Wouter van der Kolk. I hope I've got the name correct. He's the founder of UVIT. He founded UVIT at a time when the idea of vitamin gummies, especially for kids, wasn't an obvious category, and he built it as one of the best known consumer health brands in this country. What makes this journey very special is, or very compelling, is that UVIT isn't a pure tech story. So, in this conversation, we talk about what it actually takes to build a consumer health brand in Indonesia. So, without further ado, please welcome our guest, Wouter.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being on Durian Dreaming and thank you for taking out the time.
My
So,
pleasure.
let's start, Wouter, from the very beginning. Because your story, and as I read in the introduction, isn't a very obvious one. So, how did you actually end up here?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, it's been about 11 years now that I've been in Indonesia, but I didn't come straight from the Netherlands. So I born and raised in the Netherlands, but after I graduated, I decided to instead of going into sort of a normal job in consultancy or any big corporate, I thought it's time to explore the world, and I found this vacancy for a tech startup in Myanmar of all places, and decided to go for it. So this was with the German startup builder Rocket Internet, and I went to spend 1 year in Myanmar working for them there, with the idea that after that I can always come back and do like a normal job back in the Netherlands. But that obviously never happened, and after a year there, they asked me to start one of their ventures in Southeast Asia, which was Carmudi. So they asked me to choose between Philippines, Vietnam, and Indonesia. And I decided on Indonesia because it was the biggest market, so that sounded exciting. And also, of course, there's an interesting history there with the Netherlands. And I actually have some family that used to live here. Like my great grandmother used to share stories about her time living in Ambon, where her husband was a teacher. And so there's some link there, which made me, I guess, a bit more curious about this country than the others. And I just went for it. So I came here to start Carmudi as sort of the local co-founder within the bigger Rocket Internet network. And then while I was here, I met my co-founders a couple of years in and built UVIT. And of course, I met my wife here, and I have a 2-year-old daughter. So I guess I came for work, but stayed for love in the end.
And how did UVIT first appear for you? Like, was it like one of those aha moments or something you kind of stumbled over time?
Sure. Well, so it wasn't my idea, actually. So it's the three of us that are the co-founders. And actually, the company was started by my co-founder, who had previously built a pharmacy chain. And he's 10 years older than me, so he had quite a bit of experience as an entrepreneur. And that's about 150 brick and mortar stores, like a real sort of pharmacy chain. And he handed over the management of that company and was ready to do something new. And he came up with the idea to bring some innovation into the supplement category, building on the learnings, from building the pharmacy chain. And with that idea, sort of, he started toying around, and then we met. And I got very excited about working with him and learning from him as an entrepreneur. Sort of felt like a really great way to learn the ropes for me, because at that time I didn't have that much experience yet, and also a great opportunity both to build something disruptive, something innovative in this category. So it felt like a really great opportunity to do something in that direction, and build a great company, but also have a positive impact.
Wow. And then why just kids? Like, what kind of gave you an idea that while I want to venture into this category, and you have a friend who was running a pharmacy chain, so he knew the know-how of distributing at least. But
Yes.
why just the kids gummies?
Well, actually, we started in adults. So the first product was a multivitamin gummy for adults. And then only a year later, we launched a multivitamin gummy for kids, and then sort of branched out and developed the range. And now the kids category is indeed very dominant and the biggest part of our business in Indonesia. But we still have, products for adults and beauty focused as well. So we sort of have those three categories of kids adults' health and beauty. But Indonesia, the one that really worked is actually in the kids category. So that's the biggest market share. And I think that's, where the gummy format really tackles a couple of problems, right? So first and foremost, kids just love to take it, right? So it just makes it really easy for the parent to give the vitamins to their kids compared to any other tablet or any other format that the kids don't enjoy as much. So we tried adults, we tried kids, and kids is where we saw really great momentum and traction, sort of very naturally, very organically, and then we sort of doubled down on that.
Okay.
Right.
So, looking back, of course, like you mentioned, that there was a called out space or an opportunity to venture into. And you had partners who understood or knew the market pretty well. But do you still think that you would worked because you were early or because you executed well once the market was ready?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So definitely we were very early. So in hindsight, like it feels, we were really pioneering, this new subcategory of gummy vitamins or even lifestyle vitamins, where at that time, all the vitamins came in pills or tablets or for kids, syrups, and that's it, So of course we saw a big trend of gummy vitamins in other markets, the US, of course, but also more close to home in like Japan or Australia, but not so much in Indonesia yet. So yeah, we saw the gummy format as a way to sort of change the narrative from vitamins and in pill and tablet format that you take when you're sick, which is really sort of the curative mindset where people take vitamins when they're sick or out of energy, almost like a medicine, right? And these products are mostly marketed by pharma companies with very medicinal kind of positioning, right? So it's pills, tablets, white bottles, doctor recommendations, and like a really pharma ethical product kind of look and feel. Whereas the big change that's happening in the market is where people go from sort of this curative mindset to a more preventative mindset, right? Where they take vitamins on a daily basis, where they take care of their health and as part of a healthy lifestyle on a daily basis to prevent getting sick, right? So this is a change in customer behavior, and that opens opportunities, right? Change is always good for entrepreneurs, and that creates opportunities. And we saw the gummy format as a way to sort of change the narrative a bit from a pill that you take when you're sick to a delicious gummy that you take every day. And we also realized that there's this sort of pain point around synthetic chemical ingredients in those pills, and should I be taking those every day? And so the gummy sort of reframes that a bit, and that's why we really leaned into the naturalness of the product as well.
How do you want to show the packet of the gummies for
Yeah,
our
sure. So
viewers?
this is the multivitamin for adults. So this is
Okay.
a 38 pack. So as you can see, we even put the fruit really big on it.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's a multivitamin, so it balances sort of like a supplement with lifestyle as well. So that's sort of we want to strike the right balance between something that's trusted, something that has a real health benefit, something that like looks and feels, and not only that, but actually delivers on the health benefit side, but on the other hand can fit in your daily life.
Okay.
Right.
So let's talk about the reality of building on the ground. Now, as a foreigner founder, what was the first real cultural shock you experienced while building UVIT in Indonesia?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So my experience was a bit unusual because I was coming from Myanmar, actually. I was not coming from the Netherlands, and I just spent 1 year there. And building a business in Myanmar was very hard, very, very hard. Like, if you think there's a lot of obstacles or challenges in Indonesia, it's nothing compared to Myanmar, including definitely also the lack of talent, right? So it was very, very, very hard to find talent in Myanmar. And if I hear other foreigners talk about how hard it is to find talent in Indonesia, I always think back like, this is nothing compared to Myanmar.
Okay.
So for me, coming here, it felt a bit like a breath of fresh air, like, wow, this is actually much easier. Communication is easier, felt less cultural barriers. I felt the team is more worldly, more tuned in with technology, more modern, so you have to imagine in Myanmar, I would literally go to office wearing a longi, So because that's just how everyone goes to office. Like, it's still very traditional, internet was still a relatively new thing over there. So, there's like the gap is so much bigger still. So compared to that, this felt like, oh, this is, easier, I feel I can
Yeah.
connect, but that being said, of course, there's lots of differences. I think the one that really strikes me as a big difference between the Netherlands and Indonesia is sort of the flexibility in Indonesia versus a very, very planning focus in the Netherlands. Dutch people like to plan everything, right? Like if I would call my friends and ask them to meet up this weekend, then definitely no, because everyone already has their agendas filled up for the next 2 months for every weekend, perhaps. In Indonesia, there's no such thing, right? So the flexibility, the Netherlands values punctuality, deadlines, strict agendas. Indonesia is, adapts schedules much more to relationships, to the context, to the seniority, etc. To be honest, like this flexibility fits me. Like I also get a bit agitated with the really like diligent, ruthless planning in the Netherlands. So I think that sort of naturally fits me, which is probably where I survived. And I think also if I look at some interns that we would have that came and went working for us that are from the Netherlands, this would be often the point where there's so much friction that at some point they just can't deal with it and they just go back home. Whereas others, they sort of thrive with that. But there's many other differences, of course.
Then, okay, then what's one thing about building a startup in Indonesia that outsiders massively underestimate?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, to be honest, I also had to go through this learning curve, right? And I think that the biggest thing is that foreigners can be a little bit arrogant, in thinking that, they know better. Because from their perspective, they see all these kind of inefficiencies and all these problems from their perspective, yeah. And they know, the products that sort of solved or overcame those problems in other markets, right? And they think they can just bring them here and disrupt the market and be successful, right? But in reality, a lot of those inefficiencies are sometimes just like optimized around the reality of the local market, right? The culture, the infrastructure or lack of infrastructure or the regulation or things like that. So you can definitely not just come in and think that you can sort of copy and paste and be successful here. So you really need to understand the market, the culture, the people, and then build something for Indonesia with a really good understanding of Indonesia, and also together with Indonesians, right? That have to become a very critical part of your journey of building a business. So I think Rocket Internet definitely quite guilty of this one. In my office, for example, we were working together with companies like Easy Taxi and Food Panda, who have all since closed down. And I think they were indeed trying to do exactly that. Like, for example, Food Panda, right? So they sort of like copy this very, very rigid, very controlled way of doing food delivery, right? So it's like restaurant food delivery, but they had like their own fleet of drivers and like a control tower in the office where they completely planned everything for each driver, when to pick up where and where to deliver, and try to optimize that with like increasingly sophisticated and complex systems. And it just didn't really work. Their margins didn't work, right? They were still always late and had a lot of customer complaints, etc. And then, Gojek came and they sort of worked with what is already there, which is like the object drivers, and they don't try to plan everything for them. They just give the order to whoever happens to be closest to the restaurant, instead of trying to map their routes and do everything like really, really planned out, and sort of work with the ecosystem, work with the local culture, even the groups of object drivers that are already there, etc., etc. So I think, if you want to build a business here, that's the way to do it.
Right. Now, UVIT is predominantly into kids gummies. So when kids are the users, but parents are the decision makers, how does that change how you think about brand messaging and growth?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we, when it comes to the kids category, so what we say, we have to be kids loved, moms approved. So we really have to be both. So we have to make sure that kids love our products, So that means, delicious flavors, exciting packaging design. Like we have all those monster packs, right? That really attract the attention of the kids. Different shapes, different, funny stories, all sorts of campaigns with collectibles in the pack and things like that. So we really want to make sure that we are the most delightful vitamins, the most exciting vitamin on the shelf for the kids, right? So kids love, but in the end, mom is actually the decision maker here, because this is not a candy, this is a supplement, right? So she needs to approve. So she needs to check, is this a quality product? Does it actually have like good content? Is it not too high in sugar? And whatever concerns she may have. So it's really a balance of those two. So we have to build trust with the mom, and also the mom would buy the products for the rest of the family, right? So that's why we have sort of this whole range, and we have the multi adults or beauty products as well for her that she would buy for herself, for her husband, and then she would buy the kids for the kids as well. So it's sort of like for the whole family. So that's where the mom plays a key role. But definitely, how we are different than some other brands is that we really look at it from the kids' perspective as well.
Okay. They say that no founder gets it right the first time. So, what is an early mistake you made at UVIT that was painful at that time? But
Sure.
now you can laugh about it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there's many, right? So you're absolutely right. Like when we went in, I mean, although my co-founder has experience building a pharmacy chain, it's a retail business. It's still something very different than a consumer goods business. And my background was in tech, so I didn't have any experience with packaged goods or anything like that. So there's many different mistakes that we made. I think the sort of the bigger one where I think I really learned important lessons from is to drive sales and distribution very aggressively too early. So when we started, we only had our multi-adults. We didn't even have the kids products yet, right? And our idea at that time was, okay, we can be the Red Bull of vitamins. We can have like one awesome SKU, and we don't need a product range, and we're just gonna, this is it. And we raised some funding to support the launch. So we were lucky to have some support right from the get-go, sort of pre-revenue. We already had some VC money in, and we could go and and drive distribution and sales. So once we had the product approved and registered and produced and listed in the first chains, sort of our mindset shifted to like, okay, now let's just really drive sales and distribution, right? So we were very busy with listing the product everywhere, hiring sales promoters to drive the sales in store, doing sampling, and just doing whatever it takes to really drive the sales, which I think is good, but at the right time. I think in hindsight, there was too early actually, because we should have taken more time to really validate product market fit, to really see like, does this actually do well organically without us putting so much pressure behind it? Do we need to change anything? Most likely, yes, right? Like, what are the chances that the first time you launch something, you immediately get it right? Like, probably it's not yet quite right. So you have to, in hindsight, I would have focused a lot more on then optimizing, tweaking, changing the packaging design, changing the pack size, changing the flavor, changing the price point, changing the positioning or the communication, and et cetera, until we have something that really works sort of organically, and then start to really push. Because if you do it too early, it's very inefficient, of course, right? It works, but it's very inefficient because you're going to spend a lot of money on sort of pushing something which doesn't have like a very strong product market fit yet. And we sort of figured this out along the way. A year later, we launched the kids product. That was already a lot more successful right off the start. So that sort of helped us a lot. So yeah.
Okay, very insightful, and a lot of learnings for the startup folks, you're starting for the first time. Now let's talk about people, because like you said, you have the product range, you have the distribution in place, you have nailed down your consumers, but execution really comes down to teams. So when you hire today, what do you look in a CV beyond just the brand name companies?
Sure. Yeah, great question. And I couldn't agree more. Like in the end, what's really critical to success is building a great team and a great culture. And we spend a lot of time doing that, and I invest, a lot of my efforts into doing that. And I think that's one of our great achievements, is that indeed we now have like a very solid team, really positive culture, very collaborative. People help each other out, back each other up. work hard when it's required, but also enjoy the journey when they can. And it's generally a very, very, very nice vibe, you know, with the team in the office. But that doesn't come natural or automatic. Maybe like it's a lot of hard work, and indeed, like it starts with hiring, right? So I think for me, in a startup, what you need is people that can build, right? You need people that can create something. Like what I always tell my team, and especially when they first join, is we don't hire you to be here just to operate and keep things going the way they are, right? You're here to build. So if you imagine a construction yard where a big house is, a big villa is being built, you are one of the builders, right? And we have different people doing different parts, and this guy is building the bathroom, and this guy is doing the kitchen, and this one is doing another extension towards the back, and it's messy, and you get mud in your face, and it looks like it's a bit chaotic and all of that. But that's the people we need, people that can handle that, enjoy that, thrive in that, and actually can create things. So this is not like a finished villa where we just need you to sort of keep sort of do the maintenance only. You have to build. So that's sort of a mindset that I always look for, and ask for examples and try to find, like, did this person actually do any of this kind of building, or did they just sort of keep things going and watch over the store? So I think that's one very critical mindset. That doesn't really link directly to big names of companies. To be honest, like it's not easy to successfully hire from big FMCG companies, because of course we get quite a lot
Actually,
of applicants.
right. I was coming to that question because do you see a real difference between people coming from big multinationals versus smaller local companies? Like, who tends to adapt better in a startup?
Yeah, great question, actually. Well, maybe let me first say something generally about coming from big corporates, whether it's local or international. So we have great people in our company that have previous experience in such companies, and we have had like really big failures as well of people where it just didn't work out. Like I think the more experience they have in those companies, the harder it becomes. Like sort of a rough reference in my mind is if someone has more than 10 years of experience in very big FMCG of corporates, it will probably be quite hard for them to make the transition and be effective in a startup, and deal with the lack of structure, the lack of formality, and the pace of execution, the ownership that's required, the decision maker that's required. It's just so different that I now tend to prefer having slightly more junior, like mid-manager maximum, people coming in, and then sort of groom them and let them grow. So the best people in our team have been such hires that have like between 5 and 10 years experience, and then spend a couple of years with us and sort of grew through the ranks and now manage different departments, instead of bringing some big wig in and let them hire like with all their experience, manage like a big part of the company. So then between local and international, like actually, we have success stories on both sides, definitely, right? Like international FMCG companies, they tend to hire like very high qualified, very smart, very diligent people, right? But in terms of experience, indeed, like in terms of the hustle, right? Definitely, that's more from the local companies. So I guess it differs a little bit between the different teams. So if you have something like design, maybe fine from international FMCG, but if you have something like sales operations, or like really the sort of operational work, then yeah, I think that hustle is done more by the local FMCG companies. And also the one big difference is that the international FMCG companies, they tend to have relatively little freedom locally, to build the brand, so they usually have like global brands with global head of marketing, and like global brand guidelines with quite a rigid direction already in it. And within that, within those very narrow boundaries, then the local marketing team or whatever, they can sort of tweak a little bit and localize a little bit, but they're not as used to creating something from scratch, whereas the local companies, they do, right? Like they actually create local brands, local,
Mm.
like launch local products only for Indonesia and really think from zero, how are we gonna do this? So I think, when it comes to product development, but also even brand management and things like that, sometimes that's something that we struggle with these big FMCGs, the MNCs.
Right. Wouter, I read somewhere that one of your key suppliers have been acquired by a private equity firm. Now, while that can bring more structure and scale, but it can also introduce new pressure, say around margins, less flexibility, volume commitments, and so on and so forth. So, when a key supplier goes through a private equity acquisition, what's the first thing you personally start paying attention to as a brand?
Um, Great question. So it depends a bit where they are in sort of importance, right?
Mm.
But if this is like a key supplier, then definitely um, the tricky thing in Indonesia is everything is relationship based, right? So will the people change or not is probably a very important question, right? Because you build relationships with those people over years, and that's where a lot of the trust comes from, more even than the legal documents or anything
Mm.
like that, right? So if there's like, in addition to the change of ownership, a big change of management, for example, that's probably a lot more disruptive than if it's exactly the same team and just different owner, but they trust the team and to continue, because you can keep that relationship, because the biggest disruptions usually come when sort of our contact person, whether it's at a supplier or even at a retailer, for example, changes, and you suddenly have to sort of start building that relationship from scratch, because those relationships are so critical, to getting things done and having mutual trust. So, but of course, the second one is the legal agreements, right? So really tightening the bolts on whatever clauses you have in terms of, because you don't really know what their plans are, right? So it brings uncertainty, and yeah, of course, you want to cover the legal side of that as well. But I think it's with everything in Indonesia, right? It's relationship first, and then
Yeah,
the legal side second.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, because while these changes does impact and maybe require to relook at certain strategies. But when you're building at scale, what worries you most? Is it the supply chain? Is it the regulation? Is it the competition? What is it?
Sure. Yeah, great question. And I guess the answer would be different at different stages of the business. I think right now, like we're, quite well organized in terms of our supplier network, in terms of all our partners, and all of them are also ready for scale, right? That's sometimes a challenge early on where you work with partners that are not ready for scale, so you have to change the whole supply chain again. But by now we sort of figured that all out, and I think that's very stable and very strong. Like last year, actually, in terms of competitive activity, we've seen a lot of it, and it's been quite an interesting a year for us, where we did sort of the pioneer in the gummy vitamin category and really created that category, and we're the number one gummy vitamin brand. But now we see that the category is really heating up, and there's a lot more other brands coming in and a lot more
Okay.
competition, which I think two sides of that. Like on the one side, it's actually a good thing, because we have been doing a lot of the hard work of creating the category, which means educating customers on why they should be taking gummy vitamins instead of something else. And the same with retailers, same with distributors, and really creating that step by
Mm,
step is a lot of hard work.
mm,
But in the end, we need competitors to help to grow the category. So they are now also spending money on marketing,
mm,
on getting the message out, and that actually helps us because we are the number one. So if the category grows, and we maintain our market share, we will actually grow. On the other
mm,
hand, of course, we have to really make sure that we stay ahead. So driving innovation, making sure we are, like I said, like the most delightful product for kids, being innovative, keeping all of that, and it sort of keeps us on our toes, right? So I think that's also a positive thing, because it sort of keeps the team sharp, keeps the team active, and keep them thinking about the next step and the next step to stay ahead. And but what sometimes concerns me is some competitors that are really sort of like follow like almost like a copycat strategy,
yeah.
and there are some of them out there, unfortunately, that are really just looking at our product. Clearly what they've done is sit in the meeting room, said this is the market leader, let's just look at their product, take it all apart, and let's just try to mimic or copy as much as possible, where we see like, for example, these pouches, right? Like Actually, in most markets, it's not very common to have vitamins in pouches with individual
Yeah.
wraps inside. Like most of the time, it's bottles. We do it
Yeah.
because it helps with the heat, because otherwise the gummies get sticky and it get nasty, and it's more
Okay.
practical in Indonesia. But and now we see so many brands all starting to do the same, and some brands even like exactly the same shape, exactly the same size,
Yeah.
sometimes even the similar color tones, etc. So I think that's yeah, like I don't know, like I think that's a bit sad sometimes, you know.
Right. Wouter, one last question. A lot of listeners to Durian Dreaming are early in their careers. So, if someone in their 20s or 30s is building a consumer goods startup, what's one mistake you'll strongly warn them against?
Okay, great question. Well, I think one is like what I shared earlier. I think that's such an important lesson for me, is to really, really keep honing and crafting the product until you have something that works organically, and to really put love and effort into that. Don't think that you can, take some shortcut and do something that's easy, because if it's very easy, then probably others can also easily do it, right? So um, putting real effort and love in crafting a great product, and then testing it with real customer feedback, doing small pilots, doing small experiments to see if it actually works. Try if you can sell it in a small scale or whatever ways you can get more data, more feedback, more information about is this something that really works in the real world or not. Probably you need to adjust it, right? Probably you didn't get it right the first time, and you sort of have to craft it and craft it and craft it, and keep focusing on that for a while, until you have something that you see is just sort of organically really working, right? Which now online you can actually find out quite easily, right? Like once you sort of see the momentum, even though it's still small, you can see it organically is growing. There's real enthusiasm. There's real sort of repeat purchase. People are coming back to buy the product again. They're starting to recommend it to others. Only then start to think more about what the next product line, or how can you scale this, etc., etc. And linking back to the first point, I think don't be afraid to do things that are hard, because a lot of people, they tend to focus on things that are easy because they're easy, but then yeah, that's not a great opportunity in general, because then someone else can probably copy you really easily as well. So I really learned to embrace the challenges, embrace the obstacles, create real value. So don't be afraid of those obstacles, but embrace them and see them as opportunities.
With this answer, I have one more question playing on my mind. I'm
Sure,
going to
go
go
for
ahead
it.
and ask. So, if you were starting from scratch today, which consumer categories in Indonesia would excite you most?
Yeah, very good question. So also that is changing, so of course last year we've seen a lot about the Indonesian economy and how the middle class is actually declining in terms of number of people, and at the same time, it's like a vast market, right? So I think you should really think carefully of, do you want to go sort of really mass? But really mass is very hard because it's very price sensitive, right? Especially in consumer goods, you have very strong local players with very efficient operations, very low production cost, that can distribute very efficiently and reach those mass customers, but they do huge volumes, right? So it's a very different game, basically, right? And then you have sort of the really upper end of the market, and they will always have spending power. So like the very premium, very sophisticated customers, and you have a lot of wealthy people, especially in Jakarta. So that's a very, very different one. And then you sort of have sort of the middle class, upper middle class, in between that. So how do you find your place in that? And that's not easy, because it's not always possible to combine those different categories with one brand or with one product and extend it, from one to the other.
Thank you so much, Wouter, to be a part of this conversation. It was a great conversation. Thanks for sharing so
Sure,
openly.
my pleasure. Yes, thank you so much, Naya. Thank you so much for having me, and hopefully it helps some of your listeners in their own entrepreneurial juniors or journeys, or just for entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah, this was a pleasure. Thanks, Wouter.
Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Durian Dreaming. I hope today's discussion sparked some new ideas for you. Don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts, and stay tuned for more exciting stories. Until next time, keep dreaming big.